we'll come to the what's the word they use for engaged people?
I'm not going to say it.
Again, welcome to King's Baptist Bible College. This is the book of Genesis we're going through, part 1 of our survey through the Pentateuch, Lesson 7. And this, hopefully, we'll finish Genesis tonight. Again, we're looking at the 4 main events in the book of Genesis: creation, flood, fall, the Tower of Babel, and the 4 main people: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. And we covered Abraham already, and Isaac, we got most of him done, and we're looking at Jacob's life. And we'll be looking at Joseph. Again, just the 4 main characters, and some of them there's overlap here where, they go across, because if you remember, Abraham died when Jacob and Esau was probably around 5 or 6 years old. So there's a lot of crossover in the Bible, but those are where the main things are taken out of. And I believe, I remember right, we stopped in chapter 34 after he met Esau, his brother, and God protected him and watched over him and changed his name from Jacob to what? Israel. And anybody remember what Jacob means?
Heel grabber.
Yes, deceiver, heel grabber, and Israel means, anybody remember? Prince with God. You see that L at the end in the words you read in the Bible, that's the word for God. So it's Prince for God. And it says, Dinah, the daughter of Leah, went, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land, and Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, and took her, and lay with her, and defiled her. And his soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel, and spake kindly unto the damsel. Well, he may have spoke kindly, but he didn't really do the right thing, did he? And we're going to see a little bit of irony here, that now he's in love with her, and he wants to marry her. Dad, get her for me. Back in the Bible days, typically, it was the father who arranged the marriages with their children. So, Bryce, your mom and dad be arranging your wedding for you. And you say, Dad, get her for me.
Yeah.
Mom, get her for me. I have friends that, I worked at a Korean church 8 years, and I have friends that, they were Christians, and this pastor the pastor was the pastor at our church down in Roanoke. When he was planning to get him a wife, he invited all these girls to the church. He said, pick out which one you want, basically. And told her, so he looked, and he said he picked out the smartest one out of the group. Said she was the top of Pt01 girls' school in Korea. He said, I picked out the smartest one because I wanted help. I wanted help when I was pastoring. So Unia was her name. And but I have other friends. They weren't Christians, from India. And the guy who right now is in charge of the IT department over where I work, he never met his wife till he went over to India to get married. So the family arranged the marriage, so he had never met her before. And I asked him, I said, what does she look like? He said, I don't know yet. But Shechem loved Dinah and wanted to marry her. And but Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to commune with him. And the sons of Jacob came in from the field, and when they heard it, the men were grieved and very wroth. That is very mildly. They were angry. And but Israel, he thought, well, we're too small to do anything, right? And so let's just calm down. And Hamor communed, saying, the son of my son Shechem longeth for your daughter. I pray thee, give him to wife. And so what they did, they said, okay, we'll make a marriage pact between your group and my group. So that I'm the king of Shechem, and my son's the reigning prince, and he loves her. He'll do anything, whatever kind of dowry you want for her. He said he's willing to do it. And the interesting thing was, said out of the sons of Hamor, said he was more honorable than the rest. Does that give you an idea what the rest might have been like? And they talked to the men of Shechem. They said, unless you get circumcised to be like us, no deal. And Hamor went back to the people and told them, said, hey, they had, of course, Jacob had a lot of cattle, a lot of sheep, cattle, all this. And he said, hey, let's make a pact with them. Let's make a treaty. We'll take their daughters, and of course, right now he only had one daughter, but he said, and their cattle will become our cattle. So the father was thinking of profit. I'm going to make some money out of this. My son will get the woman he loves, and we'll get all these cattle. We'll sort of take them over eventually. And the men said, hey, that's a good deal. But out of the children, Levi and Simeon, they had ulterior motive. And if you know anything from reading the Bible on circumcision, said on the third day you're very, very sore. You could hardly walk. And they agreed to be circumcised. Everybody was circumcised. And then Levi and Simeon went into Shechem and killed all the men and took all the possessions. There was revenge, blood vengeance, blood revenge. And of course, Jacob was a little bit perturbed at his two sons. He was afraid, and what he said, hey, you're going to make a stink to the rest of the people around here. They're going to hear about all this, and they're going to kill us. And of course, Jacob was afraid again. You notice that a lot in the family line, but Simeon and Levi, they were the blood brothers of Dinah. Anybody remember how many children Leah had? She had, first one was Reuben, right? Then it was Simeon and Levi, and then Judah. And Dinah was her daughter too. And so this was their full sister by their mother, and they were upset. And they went in and killed all the people. They took their sheep and oxen and ass, which was in the city, and that was in the field, and all the wealth and all their little ones and their wives. So they took slaves. They took the children, they took the women, they took all the spoil they could. And Jacob, he was upset, said, ye have troubled me to make me stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and Perizzites, and I being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house. And they said, should he deal with our sister as with a harlot? And they were right. But they shouldn't have deceived their dad. And we'll see later, when the blessing comes out, typically it would have been to Reuben, the oldest, but he went in after Rachel died and slept with Rachel's handmaid, so he defiled his father. And then here, Simeon and Levi, they lied and deceived their father. And we'll see Judah became the blessed line to which the Messiah would come. Jacob, the favorite son, or Joseph, the favorite son, we'll see later, gets a double inheritance. He gets a double blessing. So again, the blessing and the birthright are divided. Judah gets the birthright, and Joseph gets the blessing. So they kill him, they take off, and the Bible says that God made the people to fear. Let me go back here. And it said, it caused the people to fear. But what do we see here in chapter 35? And God said unto Jacob, arise, go to Bethel, and dwell there. Now remember, Bethel is where he first wrestled with the angel of the Lord, and he slept on the pillow. He saw the angels descending. And anybody remember what Bethel means?
House of God.
House of God. El Bethel is God of the house of God. So we'll see that later. And there was an altar. He built an altar there when he fled from his brother Esau. And look at verse 2. Then Jacob said unto his household and all that were with him, put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. What do you notice here? They weren't exactly all followers of Jehovah, were they? They had strange gods. Now remember, Rebecca stole her father's God and hid on him. Remember, she set him underneath her and said, "Oh, the time of women are upon me, so I can't get up." And then Jacob got angry at Laban, and they went back and forth. And he said, "I could hurt you. Well, I could hurt you. And what did I do?" And remember, they made that pact, and they called it Mizpah. And remember what I mentioned about what you see in a lot of Christian magazines or sell places? They got these little necklace that are sort of broken apart, and it says Mizpah. The Lord watch between me and thee till while we're absent one from another. That wasn't for your loved one, Bryce. That's not something that you should necessarily think about giving your sweetie there. It was between Jacob and Laban. Said, if you cross that line, you're going to get hurt. So you stay on your side, I'll stay on my side, and God will watch this covenant that we made, that we won't come across that line to hurt one another. And but Jacob here is telling them to put away your strange gods from among you and be clean and change your garments. They were basically taking a ritual cleansing, said put off the old and be ready for the new. And this is where God, where he says, hey, we need to get right with the Lord. Now remember, he has most of his children. He doesn't have all of them yet. He has 11 of them, 12 counting Dinah, and yet Benjamin is still to be born. And basically most of his children, for most of their dad's life, basically saw a father that wasn't living for the Lord right. He was the deceiver, and then he met his father-in-law, the deceiver and trickster. So he's finally getting his heart right with the Lord. Said, hey, get rid of all this stuff. He should have done it long ago, and yet he was serving God, but it didn't look like his family were wholeheartedly serving the Lord. And they buried the stuff under an oak tree. And in verse 5, and they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were round about them, and they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob. So God protected them when they could have easily been killed. So he builds an altar in Bethel. Rebecca's nurse dies there in this place. Now, you want to say that, Bryce?
Oh.
Alon Bakshu.
It's okay.
Something like that.
I'll let you handle that.
But God promises to bless Jacob at Bethel. He made a altar there. He sacrificed to the Lord. And then Rachel, travail, she goes into labor with Benjamin and dies in the way to Edar. Anybody remember where Rachel died? What was the name of the city? Anybody remember the city of David? Bethlehem. So Bethlehem is the city of David. Now David was from Judah, but Bethlehem was in the tribe of Judah, but right across in Jerusalem, that became Benjamin's tribe. So he died right near Bethlehem. And Bethlehem and Jerusalem are fairly close to each other. Here's where Reuben dishonors his father and lies with Bilhah, Rebecca's handmaiden. And we'll see the sons of Jacob, and we'll see where they go to Hebron. Jacob came to Luz, which is in the land of Canaan, that is Bethel. He and all the people were with him, and they built an altar and called the place El Bethel, because their God appeared unto him when they fled from the face of his brother. But Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried beneath Bethel under an oak. And the name of the place is Alon Bakshi, something like that. And God appeared unto Jacob again. Now, sometimes, if you ever want to do a study, just look at the time God in the Old Testament appears to somebody, and what is the circumstance and what is the results of the meeting. And God said unto him, thy name is Jacob, thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And he called his name Israel. And it was after that he got rid of the false gods and started cleaning up his family. So now, you're no longer the deceiver, heel grabber. You're a prince with God. You're a prince with me. God's talking to him. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply, and a nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loin, and the land which I gave Abraham and Isaac, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land. And God went up from him in the place where they talked with him, and Jacob set other pillar in the place where he had talked with him, even a pillar of stone, and he poured out the drink offering thereon, and poured oil thereon. And Jacob called the name of the place where God spake unto him Bethel. So you got to figure this was probably a fieldy area, but later it became a very thriving city in Israel. And you figure, anywhere there's a landmark, there's usually some type of something built. Now, just talking about landmarks, now, how many has ever been to the Peaks of Otter? Now, anybody ever been to the Washington Monument? Do you know one of the stones in the Washington Monument came from the Peaks of Otter? That was the stone that Virginia sent from the Peaks of Otter as a monument or a remembrance to Virginia. And so they went journey from Bethel, and there was a little way to Ephrath. Remember he said, "O Bethlehem Ephrathah," where Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor, and it came to pass, she was in hard labor, and that midwife said unto her, "Fear not, thou shalt have this son also." And it came to pass, as her soul was departing, for she died, that she called his name Ben-Oni, no son. But his father called him Benjamin. And anybody remember what Benjamin means? Ben, son, Jamin, right hand. So basically, Benjamin means son of my right hand. And it's just interesting that a lot of Benjamites were left-handed. We'll see that in Judges. You got all those left-handed slingers that could throw the stone. And Rachel died and was buried in the way to Ephrathah, which is Bethlehem. And Jacob set a pillar up upon her grave, and that pillar of Rachel's grave unto this day. And Israel journeyed and spread their tents at the tower of Adar. So here we see where Reuben, he lies with Bilhah, technically Jacob's wife. So he dishonored his father, and he lost his right and privilege for the firstborn. And now the sons of Jacob were 12, and the sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and Simeon, and Levi, and Judah, and Issachar, and Zebulun. Now, Issachar and Zebulun came for a while after Rachel had Joseph, because they were almost like in a baby war trying to see who could give the most children. And the sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin, and the sons of Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, Dan and Naphtali, and the sons of Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, Gad and Asher. And these are the sons of Jacob, which are born to him in Panorama. And Jacob comes to Isaac at Hebron, and there Isaac dies. So he comes back to Hebron, and Hebron, remember, was the place of the giants. When Melchizedek, when the 4 kings came in to attack the 5 kings of Canaan, when they took Lot, they also came into Hebron and a few other places and probably reduced the giant population in that area for a while, because they went and killed some of them. And now they're back in the area, and we know that at this point there were still giants there, because when the Jews were coming back into the land of promise to take it over, there were giants in the land. And of course, by the time David was king, there were very few left. Goliath, and he had several brothers and children, and there were not many giants left. And the days of Isaac were 180. So he outlived his father. Abraham lived 175, and Isaac lived 180 years old. And Isaac gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people, being old and full of days. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. So they got back together, and evidently they mended their ways temporarily. And one of your test questions for the midterm one of the questions I have on the paper, right? So let me give you this while I'm thinking about it. Who all is buried in Machpelah, in Hebron? In the cave there that Abraham bought. Anybody know? Take a guess? Abraham?
Sarah.
Sarah. We see Isaac is buried there, right? So, and who else? Which wife got buried with him there? What's that? With Isaac.
Oh,
Anybody know? Leah, the one he first got married to, not Rachel, the one he loved a lot. Or sorry, that's Jacob's wife. But Rebecca got married with Isaac, or got buried there with Isaac, and then later we're going to see that Jacob dies and is buried there, and Leah also will be buried there. So Rachel was buried in Bethlehem, and Leah is going to be buried with him in their death. And we're going to see that his sons, dukes of Esau, Edom. We'll just go through some of this quick so we can finish up the lesson. And Joseph was loved by Jacob, but hated by his brethren. Now, I have a lot of, I have one full brother. I have a lot of half brothers by different men and stepsisters by different moms. So you can imagine some of the conflict or emotion that you could get. Now, we got along pretty good. I was the oldest, and my twin brother's 10 minutes younger, but I was the oldest, and everybody looked up to us. And we were sort of almost took care of a lot of my brothers and sisters growing up, because my mom and stepdad would run different places, and we'd wind up, and my grandmother would get upset at them, and it wound up my brother and I was basically almost like fathers to them, watching them and taking care of them. But there was some animosity here. And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flocks with his brethren, and the lad with the sons of Bilhah, and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father an evil report. Now, notice it didn't say anything about Leah's children, but the two handmaidens' children. And whatever they were doing, Dad, you know what they did? I thought it was funny watching my grandsons, and I can't remember exactly what happened, but when the one got in trouble, he said, well, he did that too, he didn't want to be left alone, and he said, well, he did something too. Lots of times you don't like to take the guilt all by yourself. And he brought an evil report to his father, and what, we don't know, but you could see where animosity, little brother. I mean, anybody here have little brothers? I have a lot of little brothers, and little brothers, or older brothers probably do not like little brothers telling them what to do. Remember when David went to the camp to take stuff to his brothers? And what did his oldest brother say? I know the naughtiness of your heart. You just came to spy out the battle. He said, what have I done? Because Goliath, he was saying, isn't somebody going to answer Goliath? And his older brothers started reprimanding him. And then what did David do? He said, hey, isn't there a cause? He probably turned away from his brother. Said, Goliath is challenging us. The army of God, Israel. And, his brothers were not happy with him. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age and, of course, his favorite wife. And he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. I know if if there's ever been a funeral, or you may have heard about how sometimes families will fight with people. And we haven't had it in ours, but I got reports of saying how people fought with one another, even at the funeral itself. It's just even in death they couldn't honor their parents and try to at least keep it calm at the funeral. And Joseph had a dream, and he told his brethren. They hated him yet the more. So Joseph, he's a dreamer. He's not a Gen Z or what do they call the different groups? I can't remember what they call my group now. Getting too old. But they got all these different groups. Well, he was a dreamer group by himself. And he had this dream, and you could imagine sitting around the table at supper time and saying, "Hey, I had this dream that we were out in the field and we were doing barley, and all your sheaves of barley bowed down to me, or bowed down to my sheep." Yeah, brother, you're crazy. You think we're going to bow down to you? So you better not eat pizza before you go to bed or something. And so they hated him even the more. And of course, then when he said the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowed down to him, that was like saying, not only my children, but my dad's going to bow down to me. And he told it to his father and his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, "What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth?" And his brothers envied him, but his father observed the same. After his father rebuked him, he said, there's something different about Joseph. He's different. We should be different. We should be careful. We don't want to brag to people unduly. But we want to be careful how we treat people, what we say. Because people can, of course, some people hate you no matter what. They hate the Lord, and he said they're going to hate us. So some people you will never satisfy. But if you can, the Bible says, live peaceably amongst people as much as possible. If you can, try to live peaceably. Don't go out of your way to start things. And I know many people who do that. Jacob sent him to his brethren, and they counseled to slay him. So now remember, his brothers were now out pasturing his sheep. They were going to go to Shechem, and Shechem is up in the valley plain of Megiddo, where that big highway where people go, and it's a very fertile land, a lot of grassland. And his father said, "Hey, check on your brothers. They've been gone for a while, and you know them. They can get into trouble, so go check on them." And of course, he goes, checks on him, and he's looking around, and he can't find his brother, and he sees this man and said, who are you looking for? He said, "I'm looking for my brothers. They're like 11 brothers. Well, probably 10. Benjamin probably wasn't with them, but he said, 10 brothers. And, I heard them say they were going to Dothan." Now, say if this was the valley of Megiddo, over here by the Mediterranean Sea, there's a little mountain ridge going down here. And Mount Carmel's at the top of it, but there's a mountain range, and there are 3 valleys that cut through that, where all the caravans going to Egypt and back and forth would usually go. If they were going all the way to the sea, they would take one of those 3 valleys. Well, one is the valley of Jezreel, where the Bible says in the battle of Armageddon is going to be, where it's going to be up to the horse's bridle. Another valley is the valley Dothan that goes through there. And it would be an easy place to run into a caravan. Somebody going to Egypt to sell stuff, or somebody coming out of Egypt back to their home. And so it was a traveled place. It was like the I-81 of Virginia, of Israel. And the brethren, and he said unto them, "I pray thee, keeping their flock." Verse 17, and the man said, "Oh, they departed hence, for I heard them say, let's go to Dothan." And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. Okay, he's away from Dad. Nobody's going to know a thing. We can get rid of that bratty little brother and kill him. Then he won't be Dad's favorite after that. And they said one to another, "Behold, this dreamer cometh. Now, come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him in some pit. And we will say, some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dream? They remembered that dream. They said, yeah, maybe when Dad wasn't around, they called him Dreamer to pick on him, little brother. And Reuben heard it and delivered him out of their hand and said, let's not kill him, Reuben said unto them. Shed no blood, but cast him into a pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand on him, that we might rid him out of our hands to deliver him. And he thought, I'm going to get him back to Dad. Being the oldest, you'd think he'd have some gumption, so no, we're not going to do this, guys. But he was sort of weak-kneed, and he made up a story, said, hey, let's just throw him in a pit. Let him die there. Because, they dug wells, and many times they were dry, and they would just throw him in there. He would just die of thirst, and we could say we didn't kill him. So he thought they'd get rid of him, and so when he came, they grabbed him, they stripped him of his coat, and many colors, and they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, and there was no water. And so it may have been even miry, sort of like Jeremiah was thrown in a miry pit. There could have been mud down there, but they just sat down to eat bread. And I imagine Joseph was probably yelling, hey guys, let me out. Please, guys. And they were just saying, they may have mocked him, said, what are you dreaming about now? Are you dreaming about bread? Who knows what they said to him. But they were let him. And behold, a company of Ishmaelites from Gilead with their camels bearing spice and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. So they see this caravan of Ishmaelites. And the Ishmaelites are who? They are the ones born to Ishmael and Hagar. So they were distant relatives to Jacob and the children. And Judah said unto the brethren, hey, what profit is it if we slay our brother and get still the blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hands be upon him, for he is our brother in our flesh. Boy, that was really kind of Judah, right? Let's not kill him. Let's just sell him as a slave. He is our brother, right? And it's like they try to justify things, right? And his brethren were content. They were there passed by Midianite merchants, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. Now the Midianites were a big group. They included some of the Ishmaelites and other Arab traders. Now, if you look at a map of Israel, if you look to the east above the Jordan Plateau, there was a desert area there. Remember I said whenever they traveled, they would usually skip that area? Well, that desert area had some oasis, and that's where a lot of the Midianites would come. And they had camels, because there wasn't a lot of water there. The Ishmaelites would sometime, and the Midianites would come in, raid Israel. We're going to see when you look through the book of Judges, they'll come in and raid, grab their loot, and take off back, and they can't keep up with it. Horses have to have a certain amount of water, so they can't chase after them with horses. And by the time they get a group together, the Ishmaelites are back out in their desert strongholds and free. And remember, Gideon did that. The Midianites came in. They come harvest time. They come in, raid the land, grab the crops, and take back off. So they sold him for 20 pieces of silver and brought him to Egypt. And Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. And he rent his clothes, and he returned to his brethren and said, the child is not. And whither shall I go? And it's like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Well, he probably should have stood up for Joseph before that. So they take the coat, they shred it up and put blood on it, like as if it was attacked by a lion or a bear or something, and they deceived their dad. The deceivers getting deceived again. You see the characteristics sometimes. When you live one way, it can affect your children. And they were deceiving their father. And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid and the goat and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat with many colors, brought it to the father. And listen to what they say. I mean, they sound so sincere. Know whether it be thy son's coat or no. And they said, we found this. Is this Joseph's coat? And I'm sure it was probably, it's not like you can go buy back then a coat at Walmart. We could come to church and every one of us guys could be wearing the same shirt, right? Well, there probably wasn't many coats like this. It was probably built special to almost like to show he has the birthright. But they took it and said, is this Joseph's coat? And he knew it and said, it is my son's coat, and evil beasts have devoured him, and Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. And Joseph rent his clothes and put sackcloth on his head and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. For he said, I will go down into the grave unto my son's mourning. Thus his father wept for him. So you can imagine how heartbroken he was. His favorite son from his favorite wife, both are dead now. And he's just heartbroken. And you wonder, what did his children think when they heard his father? Because it said he wept many days. I imagine they probably heard him crying at night for Joseph. And Joseph was taken to Egypt and sold to Potiphar. And the Midianites sold him to Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of the Pharaoh and the captain of the guard. So this was a powerful man. And he saw the slaves coming in. He bought Joseph. And Joseph did really well there. He was smart. He was a follower of God. Now remember, Joseph saw his dad most of his life as a saved man. So there was a difference with him. And it came to pass at the time that Judah went down with his brethren, it turned to us, and this is a side note, after he's down there, Judah, his wife dies, so he goes in, he has his sons first, and back then there was a Levirate marriage. Now this wasn't in place at that time yet, from the law of Moses, but typically if one of your sons had a wife and he died, the next brother who was single would marry the wife to take care of her. Now you hope your brother picks a good wife if that's going to be your case, but none of them, God wound up killing them all because they were evil. And we see later that he went to some shearing with his friend, and he thought, there's a harlot. So he goes into her, gives her a pledge, not knowing that it's his daughter-in-law, because he never gave the son that should have married her to be her husband. And she said, hey, he's not doing the right thing. He's not doing the customary thing. And so they all died because they said they were wicked before the Lord. And they go up there, and God kills the other son. And then he goes into Tamar, and thinking she was a prostitute. And then he leaves. He comes back to give her a sheep from his flock, but she's not there. And he gave her his bracelet and his staff as a token until he brought back her payment. And say, hey, where's the prostitute at? So there's no prostitute here. I said, wow, okay. So we're going to look foolish if we snack around. So well, let her keep them, and we'll just go back. And he goes back, and what does he hear? Your daughter-in-law is pregnant. I'm going to go kill her. So he goes back, and they would have killed her. I said, and they come in, bring her in. Said, well, here's the man who's the father. And she holds out Judah's armband and his staff, and said, well, she's more honorable than me. I should have gave her my son, and then he never has a relationship with her, but he has two children. He has twins by her, and one of them is in the line of Christ. God doesn't pick the cream of the crop and the best people. God has his purpose, and he picked a woman. I would assume that later she became a follower of God, but that's where the line of the Messiah comes through. Kim, I don't know if you ever done the study of the women in the Bible, Old Testament, and see that you got Rahab, a harlot, you got Tamar, you got all these women that don't have the best lineage. Mary had the best one out of the group, but God used them, and God worked through them, and God can use anybody. God. God, like your dad mentioned, preached the other night, like God takes the broken vessels and takes and makes the clay and molds them into what he wants. That's what he preached Wednesday night, last night. And it was told Tamar, saying, behold, thy father-in-law goeth up to, so we talked about that. I'm trying to go through quick so we can finish the whole, we still got 12 chapters to go. So he makes the deal with her. He makes the deal with her. We still got a little bit of time. And he asked the place, where's the harlot? That was openly by the way. And they said, there was no harlot in this place. And he returned to Job and said, we can find her, So I said, well, let her keep it. And then it came to pass in the time she travailed that, behold, twins were born in her. And it came to pass when she travailed that one put out his hand, and the midwife took and bound it upon his hand, and a scarlet thread, saying, this came out first. And it came to pass as he drew back in his hand, that behold, his brother came out, and she said, how hast thou broken forth? This breach be upon me. Therefore his name is called Perez, and afterward came out his brother, that is, with the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name is Zerah. So Perez is a line where Christ came through. But you see a lot of twins in there. Now I don't know if anybody know our one musician up there, Randy. He's a twin. If you ever knew it, I don't know how many people knew it, but he's a twin. And Joseph was bought by Potiphar, and Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, captain of the guard, bought him at the hand of Ishmaelites. And verse 2, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hands. Now, when I hear that, I don't really think that Potiphar was probably a believer in Jehovah. But he knew that, and back then they believed in many gods, and he probably thought, boy, the gods are blessing this man. So everything he does turns out right, And of course, when you see God blessing somebody who's working for you, that means God's blessing you, right? And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put into his hand. So now he puts him like, okay, Joseph, you just run the house the way you think best. Because I know you know what you're doing. And he didn't worry about anything. He said, hey, I'm safe knowing Joseph's taking care of it. And our life should be like that, right? When we work for somebody, do something for somebody, they should say, oh, no worry. He got it. She got it. And we should be a light in this dark world. People are looking for something different. You saw the outpouring with Charlie Kirk. I know there's probably a lot of people, the Bible says all things work together for good to them that love God, to them that are called according to purpose. It doesn't say all things are good, so being killed is not good. But I know a lot of people said they never even heard of Charlie Kirk before. And many of them are getting more bold to be bolder witnesses for Christ. And some are just hearing more of the message. And so it's going out more than it, I'm sure that the guy who shot him wasn't thinking that was going to be, he thought, I'll put it to the end. But, it's like when persecution happens, the fires are spread. I said I worked at a Korean church, and in that Korean church, there was, they called it Fire of Pentecost, the Korean fire. It was back, I forget what year it was, but persecution happened, and what happened was that missionaries and the Koreans were arguing, fighting with one another, and one of the persons got under conviction that, it was like the missionary against the Koreans, and the Koreans against the missionaries, the national ones that were saved. They're both saved, but they were having a hard time and said, hey, this isn't right. We're not doing right for God. So they had a time of prayer, of confession to one another, and after they started confessing their sins one to another, said, hey, I did you wrong. They said, I did you wrong. And then revival spread in Korea. And it was course, Korea is, population-wise, probably more Christians in Korea than here in America, population-wise, percentage-wise. And so, yeah, Pastor Kim, Dr. Kim, he was one of my teachers in seminary. He goes over and he recruits a lot of Korean students up at Liberty. So most of them were brought here by him. Now, he's a Baptist, but in Korea, most of them are Presbyterians. But then a lot of them switch to Baptist after they start learning the Bible better. And verse 4, and Joseph found grace in his sight and served him and made him overseer. Verse 5, and it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessings of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. So he was maybe a hunk, what people would call a hunk. He was good looking. I don't know what Potiphar was like. He was a soldier. He was probably big and strong, but I don't know how old he was. But it says he didn't even worry about. He said, "I'm not worried about money, anything." I said, "I know Joseph's taking care of it." He said, "I just eat my food every day, take care of it. I go out and if I have to fight battles, I go fight battles. But I have nothing to worry about." And that's a faithful steward. Bible calls us as believers, we're stewards of what God gives us. So we should be careful what we do with the gifts and money, gifts, abilities God gives us. Verse 7, and it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eye upon Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." So she's trying to tempt Joseph to cheat. She wants to cheat on her husband. Now you wonder, did she do that with anybody else? Don't know. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, "Behold, my master wot not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand." He said, "There's no one greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How," and listen to what he says, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Notice his priority was God. Now, it would be a sin against his master, Potiphar, but he knows ultimately it would be a sin against God. And everything we do, everything we say, should always be looked at through the eyes of the Lord. Like, God, would this be pleasing to you? Would it be uplifting to you? And Joseph said, "Yeah, I have a lot of power. I could do a lot of things, but you're a no-no." You're his wife. You think she'd be convicted herself, but she wasn't. And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie with her, or to be with her. So he started staying out of sight as much as he could. Verse 11, and it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men in the house therein. So now she sees her opportunity. She caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. So he had of course it's hot in Egypt. He probably just had a light tunic on as an outer garment, and she grabbed it and he took off and he said, "I'm getting out of here." And but she kept a hold of the garment. The Bible says, resist temptation and flee from the devil when we're tempted. And it came to pass, when she saw he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of the house and spake unto them, saying, "See, he hath brought in an Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in to lie unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice." Now, I imagine some of them didn't hear her, but she said, "I screamed and he took off." So now she's been scorned, and she wants revenge. So, okay, if I can't have him, I'm going to get him killed. I'm going to, my husband will take care of him. He'll believe me over him. Well, we're going to see that. We don't exactly see the word, but I'll give you my take on it. And she said, and she spake unto him according to these words, saying, the Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which he spake unto him, saying, after this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. So he got angry, Potiphar did, thinking, oh, I trusted him. I think later, since he didn't have Joseph killed, that he may have started thinking, well, I've never seen Joseph do anything like that before. Now, we don't know, but just looking ahead, you wonder what did Potiphar think when Pharaoh made him second in charge? Like, is Joseph going to do payback? I mean, all the ones that did bad things to Joseph, he could have done payback, right? So he cast him into prison. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound. So it's a higher class prison. And he said, and he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. So again, what do they say about milk from a cow? Anybody know? The cream rises to the top. And Joseph was rising to the top. He just was a faithful person. He lived within his circumstances. Now, all of us have different things that happen to us. We all have different circumstances. So what we do the best to the ability that God gives us with where the circumstances we find us. And he was faithful, and the keeper of the prison saw this. And I would imagine for certain that he knew why Joseph was in there, that Potiphar, the captain of the guard, threw him in there because he said, well, his wife said he tried to rape her. And so, but now he's looking at Joseph, he's seeing all these things, and he looks like a pretty good guy to me. So he puts him in, he has him being his number two in the prison. He was Potiphar's number two under Potiphar's house. Now he's in the prison, and he's the keeper of the prison's number two. He keeps staying up there, doesn't he? Of course, for his dad, he was number one. And the keeper of prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made him to prosper. Now, what kind of prospering is there in a prison? I don't know exactly. I don't know what the conditions were in the king's prison, but whatever it was, the keeper thought it was going great. So we see the butler and the baker. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was wroth against the two of his officers, and against the chief of the butlers, and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard into the prison, the place Joseph was bound. And of course, we see later it says Joseph was bound in stocks and chains. So his legs were hurting at times, but now he's sort of set free within the prison. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them and served them, and he served them, and they continued a season in ward. So he said, hey, Joseph, take care of these guys till we find out what Pharaoh wants done with them. So he didn't know. They didn't know whether they're going to be killed or let go or what. So he said, hey, take care of these guys, Joseph. So Joseph, how long? It says it's for a time. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. The butler and the baker of the king of Egypt that were bound in the prison. So it's amazing. These guys have a dream, similar type of dreams, the same night, and they're being taken care of by the dreamer. So What coincidence, right? God works everything out for his purpose, doesn't he? And Joseph came in unto them in the morning and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of the Lord's house, saying, Wherefore look ye so sadly today? And they said unto him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. Now, my grandmother, had a dream book. Anybody ever see one of those or hear one of those? She had a friend that was a fortune teller that did tarot cards and all that stuff. And I don't know where she got it from, but she had a dream book. So anytime one of us dreamt something, she'd grab that dream book out. Oh, this means you're going to get money, or this means you're going to be sick, or whatever, And it's a lot of the fortune teller stuff. But my grandmother believed a lot of that until after she got saved. And I said, Mom, don't listen to them. They just make up stuff. I said, they're not real. And I said, but she got saved, and then she got rid of it. And, people, how many, I don't know you growing up, how many people, what did your horoscope say today? People got to find out what their horoscope is, and all this thing, and how to live their life, and they let all these things, the stars, control their destiny, but God controls it. And so he tells them a dream, and Joseph came in unto him and said, God said, interpretations belong to God. Tell me them, I pray you. So I wonder if Joseph told them anything about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We don't know, but he evidently was a true believer, and God was using him. And he said, hey, and he was giving God the credit all the time. It wasn't like, hey, I can interpret your dreams. He said, God interpret dreams. So, and the chief butler told him his dream to Joseph, and said to him, in my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine there were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. So he's dreaming this, and it grows very quickly. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave unto Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, this is the interpretation of it, and the 3 branches are the 3 days. Now, just a little side note, Josephus, the Jewish historian, wrote about this in there. And when he says Joseph, what did it say Joseph squeezed into it? He took, verse 11, he took the grapes and he pressed them into Pharaoh's cup. And Josephus calls this wine. So wine, it could be grape juice, it could be alcoholic wine, or it could be, in Ezekiel talks about the wine hanging on the cluster. The grapes themselves are all called wine. So today, people, when they hear wine, think of just alcoholic wine. No, the Bible, so why didn't the writers of the King James say alcoholic wine or grape juice? Well, the Greek and Hebrew, both words, all the words they use for wine, there's multiple words, but all the words they use for wine in Greek and Hebrew is one word that can be taken both ways. So the King James translators called it wine because it was a word back in the King James day that could be taken both ways. If you look at Webster's dictionary, the original one Webster wrote, he talks about wine, any fruit of the vine, and then it goes, it could be alcoholic. He's not saying it was only alcoholic, he said it could be. So it could be grape juice or alcoholic wine. So that's just a side note there. So he tells him the dream, and he had 3 branches, he says the 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head and restore thee unto thy palace, and thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner when thou was butler. So you got to remember, back then, what did they do? They didn't have a lot of still drinks. So Pharaoh's kings many times would have a food tester. And because they didn't know if somebody was trying to kill him, so they would take that cup, and I don't know if he threw them in there because he got some bad grapes and it didn't taste so good, or he thought, this tastes funny, and threw them in there or what, but they would have somebody come and eat their food. Typically, it was the person that prepared it. And with if you're drinking wine, grape juice, you would squeeze it. So, hey, go ahead, take a drink first. And so that way, if they drank and they were okay, then they knew they were safe to drink it. So you want to have too many errors in that job. And so he said, you're going to be back in your old position. Pharaoh is going to restore you back to your, remember Nehemiah was a cupbearer for the king, Persian king, and so like I said, verse 14. But think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away from out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. So he said, hey, whenever the king restores you, because that's what I'm telling you your dream means, remember me. I didn't do anything wrong. I shouldn't be in prison. I was stolen out of myself. Oh yeah, okay, Joseph. And of course he's probably thinking, is this right, or is so I don't know what he thought until after it happened. So number one dream, the baker, he said, oh, he had a good dream. Hey, why don't you do my dream too? So when the chief baker saw the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket there was all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. And Joseph answered and said, now, he was probably expecting a good report, wasn't he? This is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Oh, yeah, keep it up, Joseph, keep it up. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh off of thee. That wasn't the interpretation he wanted. Many times things happen to us that we think, Lord, that's not what I wanted. And sometimes we can look at it later and say, well, thank you, Lord. Like I mentioned multiple times, I was going to go to Sudan, work in the refugee camps. And here they messed up on which group I was supposed to go. I was supposed to go in the first group, but they said, well, we'll put you on the second one instead. But I'd already quit my full-time job. Lord, what are you doing? I'm trying to serve you. I'm trying to do the right thing. And what are you doing? Well, because I had to get a full-time job, I was an old-time gospel hour. Then I started working part-time at Thomas Road, and then back full-time. Well, lo and behold, when I was there, my wife was doing her student teaching at Thomas Road. So if it wasn't for the fact that they put me on the wrong team, I would have never met my wife. I thought it was bad, but God meant it for good. Like, Lord, what are you doing? So God can direct different things into our life to bring good out of it. Like I said, it doesn't say all things are good, but it says all things work together for good. And there's a condition. To them that love God, to them that are called according to his purpose. So he said, hey, you're going to be dead. And it came to pass in the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forget him. So whether the butler had something to do with maybe Pharaoh wasn't sure whether somebody spiked his drink or spiked his food. And was that the reason? We don't know. But for one reason, he restored the butler, but he killed the baker, and he forgot Joseph. Now, do we ever do that? Hey, pray for me. Okay. A week later. Now, what was that he wanted me to pray about? We, write them down, pray about it. So we'll see Joseph has, the Pharaoh has two dreams. Joseph interprets them, and he gives Pharaoh counsel. So we're going to look at that in chapter 41 now. Get over there, Lena. Trying to make sure we get it done in time. So, and it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed. So, how much longer was Joseph in that prison? 2 more years. I'm sure he was thinking, maybe if he came by the jail, I could say, hey, remember me? But it wasn't until Pharaoh had 2 dreams. So now they're going to need the dreamer again. So he had 7 corn, 7 cows, came out of the river. I'm cutting back on this shorter to have less space. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. Now remember the dream. Pharaoh dreamt, first of all, that 7 cows came out of the river. Big and fat and strong. Then out of the river came 7 weak, almost emaciated cows. And they ate up the fat cows. And they never got any bigger. They were still weak and shriveled up. And then he woke up, then he went back to sleep. And then he grew up 7 ears of corn. Now, corn in the Bible could be wheat, rye. It's like basically grain, like grass seed type thing. So it probably wasn't the corn on the cob that we were thinking of. It's probably like wheat or something like that. But that was called corn or maize. And it came to pass that the fat ears were eaten up by the skinny ears. And it's like they didn't get any bigger. And it's like he woke up like, oh man, I have some crazy dreams sometimes. I've dreamt I've been back in Roman days. Most of the times I'm a spy or something like that in my dream. My dreams are very action oriented. So I have all kinds of dreams. Like I said, I've been in, World War II quite often, but I've been back in Rome too. I mean, I dreamt I was in the Roman days. Yeah, so my wife said, you move around a lot sometimes. I said, she goes, I don't rarely ever remember. I said, I have a lot of dreams and I remember them a lot. And my daughter goes, well, Dad, that means you're in deep REM sleep usually. And that's why you probably don't sleep much, because you get a lot of deep sleep while you're sleeping because you dream a lot. I said, sometimes, I dreamt I was flying one time, right? I woke up and I was in midair. I had a bunk bed as a teenager, and I rolled out of the bed and I woke up in midair and I hit the floor. Thankfully, I missed the desk at the top of it, or I could have broke my neck. But I got back, climbed up in the bed, went to sleep, woke up in the morning, and my ear felt funny. I said, what's that matter? And I looked, there's blood on my pillow. Then I remember, oh, that's right, I fell out of the bed. So I smashed my one ear when I hit the floor. So yeah, I dream a lot. So if I go to Egypt tonight, you'll know why, right? So and it came to pass in the morning that he was troubled, and he sent and called all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. That's right. There's this guy in jail, king. So then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my fault this day. Well, at least finally he did remember it after 2 years. And there was there with us a young man, a Hebrew, a servant of the captain of the guard. For that the dream was doubled. So he goes on and says, hey, he interpreted my dream like he said you were going to restore me, and you did. And he said you were going to kill the butler, and you did. And I forgot about him. And it said, and so they called Joseph in, and he started telling them the dream. He interpreted the dream, said the 7 fat kine, 7 fat cows, and the 7 fat ears of corn are 7 good years. But after 7 good years, you're going to have lean years that are going to eat up all the stuff that the land said. Here's what I recommend for you. I want you to pick yourself out of somebody wise and start saving up and building up all the grain for these 7 years, so when the lean times come, you'll have plenty. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh look a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Now, I imagine Joseph wasn't necessarily thinking of himself. You remember the story of Haman with Esther? And the king had a dream, right? And he woke up. He woke up from his sleep, and then he couldn't sleep, so he said, "Hey, read me the story of Chronicles." And he read where not Haman, Mordecai had warned the king. So what did we do for Mordecai? He said, "Nothing, your lord." So he said, "Who's out in the court?" He said, "Haman is." So Haman comes in. He's coming to ask which one is it now? Ahasuerus. He's coming to ask Ahasuerus. Said, "Hey, he wants to hang Mordecai." But when he comes in, the king speaks first. Said, "Hey, what should I do if I want to honor somebody?" And of course, Haman, well, he doesn't say this out loud. He said, I mean, who would the king want to honor more than me? Right? I'm the best guy around, right? So he said, "Well, king, do this. Take one of your robes, your royal robes, and give it to him. Put on one of your crowns on his head, and let him ride in your second chariot, and have one of your most noble servants go before him and say, 'This is what the king does for whom he wants to honor.'" And Haman heard these words, which he wasn't happy about. "Go and do the same to Mordecai." Yeah, see, he was thinking, oh, he's going to be honored. I don't think Joseph probably thought that the king was going to pick him. But God uses humble people sometimes. He used people that don't think too much of themselves. The Bible says, "Let another praise thee." And Pharaoh said unto his servants, "Can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is?" And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and unto thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zephanath, and he gave him the wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, and Joseph went out over all the land. Now it's interesting, this name of his wife, they actually have now found an inscription in one of the Egyptian inscriptions that talked about her son, the forgotten one. And most people think that it's talking about Manasseh and Ephraim, that Manasseh was the firstborn, and he should have had the firstborn right, but Jacob blessed Ephraim instead of Manasseh. So they actually found that lady's name on an inscription in Egypt. I was watching some archaeology. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Now remember, he went there when he was 17, right? He was taken when he was 17. So 23 years he was down there. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. And in the 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by handfuls. And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid them in the food cities and the food of the fields, which were round about every city, laid he up the same. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much until he left numbering, for it was without. Let me try to finish up this. We see Joseph had children, Ephraim and Manasseh. And we're just going to try to go through this very quick. Famine came, and what happened? Oh, hey guys, my sons, my 10 wonderful sons, go to Egypt and get food. So what do? Obedient sons, right? They go to Egypt. Now, he kept Benjamin there. He wasn't going to lose Benjamin. So they sent him to Egypt. And, of course, Joseph probably had his head shaved, probably looked like an Egyptian official, and he's been down there 23 years. He doesn't look like your shepherd boy anymore with his fancy coat on. He probably had gold on now, so he probably had something even fancier. And he recognized his brothers, but they don't recognize him. And what does he do? He said, I'm going to test them. I'm going to give them some trials. Let me go back here a minute. they are imprisoned by Joseph as spies. Said, "You're spies." Said, "No, we're honest men from all from the same father." They said, "Okay." So how's your father? What's your father? Said, "Well, he's alive." Yeah. I said, "Do you have any other brothers?" "Well, we have one back home." "Well, I'll tell you what. You go back, bring your brother back here, so I know you're on. I'm going to keep one of you," and he keeps Simeon. Now, Simeon was one of the ones who did the killing in Shechem, him and Levi. And I just wonder, it doesn't say who was the first one who said they wanted to kill Joseph, but I just wonder if it was Simeon. You see that his character from Shechem, so that could possibly be, we don't know, but he kept Simeon. And he said, "The rest of you go home." So he put their money back in their bags, in with the grains, and he sent them back home. So they go back home, and on the way, they want to get some food out, right? And what happens? They find their money. What is this all about? And then everybody found their money still in their bags. So they go back to their dad, tell him what happened. "Where's Simeon?" "Well, the governor down there, he said we have to bring back Benjamin, or else Benjamin's not going to be let loose, and we're not going to get any more food." So what do? They didn't sprint back there, because Jacob said, "No, you're not taking Benjamin." But finally, they run out of food. One good thing about famine, sometimes it makes you go where God wants you to go sometimes. And they didn't have any food, and said, "Hey, go back and get some food." Said, "Well, no, the guy told us, unless we bring Benjamin." Said, "Why did you tell him you had a brother?" "We didn't know, Dad. We didn't know he was going to tell us to bring him here. I mean, come on, Dad. We don't know everything." I lost Joseph, I lost Simeon. Now I'll go to my grave if something happens to Benjamin. Said, "Okay, take him." So they go back, and what happens? When they get Joseph, when they get back there, he has a feast for him. He said, "Okay, we're going to have a feast. I'm just going to try to get through this quick." And he makes a feast for him, and he puts 5 times as much on Benjamin's plate. Like if, all of us here were eating, and if I put, I gave everybody here a little piece of chicken, and I put sirloin steak over here for Bryce. Man, how come he gets sirloin steak? And then I give you all lukewarm water, and I give him a nice ice-cold thing of water. You'd probably get a little jealous. So Joseph is testing his brothers again. He wants to see how they react. He said, "Okay," said, "Bless you." And he let them all go. And what did he do? He put their money back in their bag again, but he took his cup and stuck it in Benjamin's bag. And so after they leave, he tells his servant, "Hey, go get them." And and of course they knew what was going on. Said, "Hey, get the bag." And so they go back there and say, "Hey, why did you steal my master's cup? Don't you know he can divine these things?" So we didn't take it. Said, "Well, whoever takes it, let him be your servant. Let him die," because they didn't think they took it. So they open up the bag, starting from the oldest to the youngest, and they get to Benjamin's bag. They're probably, "Oh, good, they got us wrong," and they get down to Benjamin's bag and say, "Okay, he's going back." So, "No, take me instead." No. He said, "No, he's going back." And so they followed the guards back with Benjamin back to Joseph, and Joseph said, "Hey, don't you know I can foresee things?" He said, "Didn't he?" Said, and then it was Judah who comes out and said, "Hey, let me be your slave. Let them go. So my father will die if Benjamin doesn't come back. I will be your servant." And I think partially, maybe that's why God picked the line of Judah for the Messiah to come through, because he was willing. He probably had a change in his heart after all the grief they saw their dad and all the things he did. So he said, "Hey, I'll be your servant." And then he started crying. "Hey, everybody go out." And he revealed himself, said, "I'm Joseph, your brother." And of course, could you imagine the shock on their faces? "Oh, Joseph?" And so what they did, he said, "Hey, go get Dad, bring them back, all your servants, all your children, bring them back, and I'll take care of you, because there's still going to be a few more years of famine. So they bring them back, and Joseph at first had it hard to be, but they sent a wagon and everything to bring him back. And when he came back, Joseph said, hey, tell him you're do cattle, because the sheep are abomination to the Egyptians. And what did the brothers do? Oh, we're shepherds. So I don't know if they were trying to get Joseph in trouble or what, but they put him in the land of Goshen, and they thrived, they grew, and eventually Jacob dies there, and they embalmed him and took him back and buried him in the field of where? In Shechem. They buried him in Machpelah, but we're going to see later Joseph will be buried in Shechem, where Jacob bought a plot of land up there. And so Jacob's comforted. They go to Egypt, and they said there were 70 souls in all that went down to Egypt. Now remember, when we get Exodus, there's going to be a 400-year gap between the end of Genesis and Exodus. So they meet each other, they get to know Pharaoh. So Jacob eventually dies, and when he dies, what happens? Oh, now Joseph is going to get us. And one of the questions I put on your study questions for the midterm, they said, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Like I said, all things work together for good. It doesn't say all things are good. It said, yeah, God sent me here ahead of you to save lives. Not just my family, but Egypt and the world. Egypt was the breadbasket. So you had people from all over the world coming to Egypt, and Joseph was the one who saved it through God. And so he takes, and he said, hey, when I die, swear to me that you'll bury me in this plot of land that we bought off of Shechem. And so they tell him, they say yes. So Joseph, his father was sick, so Jacob, or Israel, blesses his children. And when Joseph comes in with his two children, Ephraim and Manasseh, Jacob's blind at this point, but he takes his hand and reaches and puts it on his right hand over on Ephraim. He said, not so, Father, but Manasseh is the oldest. He said, I know, my son, he will be blessed, but truly Ephraim is going to be blessed double. And after Judah, he was the second largest tribe, and most, not all the kings, but most of the kings in Israel, after they divided, most of them were from the tribe of Ephraim. Not all of them, but a lot of them were from the tribe of Ephraim. So he blesses Ephraim and Manasseh, and he said, now these are my children. So the 12 tribes were named after, included them. And Joseph, he tells Joseph of his mother's grave, where she was buried at, and he blessed them, and the younger and he said, the younger shall be blessed before the elder, which was the same for him, right? And he said, you are going to return to Canaan one day in 400 years. And Jacob blessed his sons. He charged them about his burial, and he dies. We see Joseph, chapter 50, mourning for Jacob. Joseph leaves Pharaoh to bury him. He has the funeral, and Joseph is comforted by his brethren who beg for him to pardon them. Said they thought, well, now that our dad's dead, he's going to get us back. And he said, no. Said, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to take care of you. Said, we're going to be here for a while. And he prophesied about his return. Said, hey, when you go out of this land 400 years from now, because remember that was a prophecy. It came down through Jacob and all them, and Abraham. He said, bury my body in the place. So evidently he was embalmed, and they kept the body for 300 plus years or something like that, almost 400 years. So he takes oath concerning his bones, and they put him in he dies, and they put him in the coffin. So God takes care of his people. And we finished Genesis. I know it was quick, but then we got break next week, a midterm the week after that, and then we will start the book of Exodus after that. Right. Dave, you want to pray for us?
Sure. Lord, thank you for this evening that we got to get together as a class and learn more about you, and thankful for Brother Barry as he's teaching your word, and Just appreciate the time he takes out to do this, Lord. Just that you bless us all this evening and just get us home safely. Lord, we love you so much. In your precious name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.